Hi there, I'm Scott, and this is GreatScott Knitting Dyes Yarn, episode 14. Today I'm going to be dyeing one skein of Dyer Supplier Superwash Merino. This is a 100% Superwash Merino wool yarn that is a 2-ply coming in at approximately 328 yards. I will be dyeing this with a selection of Wilton's food colorings. I'm going to be using Wilton's Color Right System Blue and Black and Wilton's Violet from their Icing food coloring collection. I have my yarn soaking in approximately 8 cups of water with 2 tablespoons of vinegar added to it, just to get it ready to go. This will soak for approximately 20 to 30 minutes to get it nice and saturated in water so that it will be easier for the dye to adhere and penetrate the fibers. So we're going to go ahead and start by mixing the dye or the food coloring. I'm going to measure out approximately 1 cup of warm tap water. I'm using warm water because it makes it easier to dissolve the food coloring, especially the Wilton's paste. That requires a little bit more stirring and mixing. So I'm going to start off with the Wilton's Color Right Blue and about 10 drops of this blue food coloring. I want the color to be relatively saturated, but I also don't want to overdo it and have more dye than I actually need for this 100-gram skein of yarn. I'm getting a paper towel here so that I can test that color when I get it mixed in, just to see that intensity, and it looks great. Next, I'm going to mix the Wilton's Violet, which is from the icing color paste. Oftentimes for a 100-gram skein of yarn, I'll use approximately a 1/4 teaspoon, but because I have this other dye and I really don't need to go crazy, because it tends to be a relatively saturated color, I'm just going to use about 1/8 of a teaspoon, or maybe slightly more than that, but again, I don't want to overdo it. And because it is a paste, it does take a while to get it to mix. And I'm going to add just a smidge more and get that stirred in and mixed in. One of these days, I think I'm going to invest in a milk frother, the little handheld battery-powered mixer that you can put on the bottom, and it makes it easy to stir these things up. And there's the violet. You can see that it's breaking a little bit because there's a blue halo around that violet dot. And last but not least is my Wilton's Color Right Black. Now, black food coloring is usually made up of all of the other primary colors, and so it does have a tendency to break. What I have noticed with Wilton's Black is that when it breaks, it tends to break into greens. So the red tends to absorb faster than the yellow and the blue. So you do get a little bit of a green halo around your color. Now, the way I'm going to be using this, I don't think I'm going to have a lot of breaking. There might be a little bit, but I think it'll look great. With my dye completely ready to go, I am going to now attempt to arrange the yarn in the pan that I'm going to use for dyeing. Now, because I'm just going to be dyeing this single skein of yarn, I don't need a great big pan. So I'm just going to use this small cake pan to arrange my yarn in. If I was doing maybe 2 or 3 skeins, I might consider a larger pan. But because it's just the one, I'm going to use the small one. And to that, I'm going to add some vinegar water. With the technique I'm going to be using, I'm going to be doing very much sort of a starting with very low immersion, but I'm going to heat my yarn up in this pan before I apply the dye. So I do need some liquid in here, and I do want a little bit of spread of color, but I don't want the yarn to be swimming in the dye when I apply it. So I'm just adding enough liquid for it to be wet. So I have rearranged the yarn into a zigzag and applied heat. So this is pretty steamy. So now I'm going to start with the blue dye on one side and sort of angling a little bit there. And then next I'm going to apply the violet dye on the other side. Again, kind of at an angle, so there's an angular stripe in the middle. And then in between the two, that's where I'm going to add the black. Now the black is going to overlap with that blue and violet, which I think will be really cool. And it's going to create a very moody look to this yarn. One thing I am going to need to check on as I go through this process of applying the rest of the dye is making sure that I have as good a penetration down into the fiber that's on the bottom of the pan, at least as much as possible. And so I might start poking and prodding here a little bit to making sure that I don't have a lot of white. Now, this is probably not my smartest move because that's really hot. So I'm going to go ahead and grab a spoon. Now, I don't want to do a lot of movement because I don't want to spread the colors all over the place, but I do want to make sure that there's some good coverage down towards the bottom of the pan. So now I'm going to add the rest of the blue dye. And do a little bit of massaging of that color into the fibers here in a second. I'm going to add the black first. And I'll make sure that this color penetrates into the lower sections. And I think I'm pretty sure that I'm done. And we just need to let it sit and heat. So just kind of poke around a little bit. I do want to make sure that I have good color coverage throughout. Now, I realize that the color is going to be very tonal in these different sections, and that's going to be great because it's going to add a level of depth and interest to this yarn. but I really don't want any stark white sections. So I think we're looking good. I'm going to go ahead and allow this to heat for the next 20 to 30 minutes, and we'll come back and check our progress. So this has been heating for about 30 minutes, so I'm going to check for the dye absorption, and it looks like there might be just a slight amount of color left. So I'm going to turn the heat off and allow this to sit and cool. Then we will wash the yarn. My yarn has completely cooled, and that's what it looks like. Man, it's looking really cool. And the water is clear. So all of that color has been absorbed into the fiber, and it looks really, really nice. I just love how it came together. So now it's time to rinse the yarn. Number one, to remove any of the residual acid that is in the yarn, as well as check for bleeding or any color that may not have absorbed. My initial rinsing right now, I do not see any color coming out of this yarn. So I will just do a couple more quick rinses in this cool tap water. Yeah, I'm not seeing any color yet. So on this next pass, I'm going to add a little bit of clear dish soap. It's a very mild detergent, and probably just about like a dime size in the palm of my hand. If there's going to be any bleeding, often this will initialize and help release any of that non-absorbed color. But I'm not seeing anything coming out. This is great. This is good. So I am going to continue to rinse the soap out of this yarn. And then when it is done, I will hang it up to dry, and we will check on the results when it is dry. Here are our finished skeins of yarn. This is the front side and the back side. The way that the black is appearing, at least in these pictures, is a little bit blown out. In person, the black sections are a bit darker, but they are not a true black. However, I think it really does work. It looks really lovely in person, and I also love the interplay between the violet and the different tones that you get of the violet and of the blue. This is a little bit truer to how it appears in person. There does seem to be maybe some slight breaking of the black into some of the green that is common with Wilton's black. But overall, it is more of sort of a reddish brown color that's really deep, which plays well with the violet and also with the blue. I was really inspired by watching different indie dyers on Instagram in various reels where they have their vats of yarn laid out, and it seems that they take these buckets of dye and just basically dump color onto the yarn, and it just sort of, the color tends to sort of stay where they dump it, even though it just looks like they're just adding tons of liquid. And it really works. And this experiment, what for me, was to try and play a little bit with just dumping color onto the yarn in different ways and allowing that color to interplay with each other as well as have some separation. And I think starting out with a little bit of water with the yarn helped in that process of allowing the color to spread a little bit, but still basically remain in the same place that it was applied. I am definitely going to have to try this technique more as I practice and get comfortable doing some different dyeing techniques, so that when I eventually make a leap to commercial dyes, that I can start getting a bit more consistency and a more realization of the colorways that I have in mind. This is very close to what I was wanting to do. It has this moodiness to it with still having little pops of brightness that are that's in this fiber as well. I hope you've enjoyed watching this episode of me dyeing yarn. And if you do, be sure to click the thumbs up button if you like this video. If you like the content you find on GreatScott Knitting's, make sure you click the subscribe button and click on the bell icon to get notified when I upload new content. Again, I hope you enjoyed this episode, and please go out, try doing this yourself. It's so much fun. Take care.